Hi and good morning, it's Jim from maverickstar. Guys, just look at what YouTube have done and Google have done. It is nothing but a shame. It's the least I can say, it's just a shame. I mean, you can see I've got channel violations, which is a strike, and now I've been demonetized. And I want to tell you why they've done that. First of all, I got the strike because I was talking about COVID-19, and the reason I was talking about COVID-19 is because if you remember, we was 9 months into the pandemic breaking out and they'd come up with a vaccine, and my only concern was with regards to that is, have they tested it on pregnancy? And I knew they could never have done that because it takes 9 months for a human being to reproduce. So I knew that they hadn't done that. I was just expressing caution, that's all. And here's the thing, my qualification in natural sciences does allow me to cover biology, and I felt that I was qualified to just mention that, but I got a strike for it. Can you believe that? I have recently, yesterday, woke up to the channel being demonetized, and the reason why I got demonetized was because I was talking about climate change. What I was saying is, do you think it's wise to just base everything on the last 200 years of climate when not considering any period of time before that? And the reason why I'm so hot on this topic at the moment is because they are doing it on purpose. It's clear that they won't talk about past glacial and interglacial cycles because that is responsible right now for the majority of the weather effects alongside the pole shift. You know what they've done is shot the firefighter trying to stop somebody's house burning down and save lives. They've shot the surgeon performing heart surgery, and they've shot the ambulance driver on the way to help some poor victim. It's no different. I should be given a Nobel Prize for what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to prevent them wasting a colossal amount of money. £100 million is what we're talking. Sorry, £100 trillion is what we're talking. This will have detriment effects to everybody on this planet because we're the ones that are going to have to pick up the bill. We know how much they've changed industry because of CO2 and carbon taxes and carbon credits. It's got to stop. It's going to bankrupt the world if it continues. My argument here is, you cannot judge what is going to happen in the future when you only look at 200 years of climate history. And I'm going to show you in this video that I'm not talking out my backside. As a scientist and qualified to talk in this field, I'm going to show you, but what I'm talking about is absolutely right, and it should be talked about, and they should pay attention. I can't believe we live in a day and age where Google are allowed to silence people. Google are allowed to victimize people in taking, the monetization off them. Should you be doing that to somebody that is trying to help? That's exactly what they've did. They have shot the messenger. If they was to listen, which they would never do that, but if they was to just listen or get their scientists to sit down and have this discussion about what time period they've selected to base what could possibly happen in the future with regards to climate, whether it's global warming or global cooling. I think we all know which it's going to be. It's going to be more along the lines of global cooling because that's where we are on the cycle of glacial and interglacial periods. And if we are rocking on the cusp of that, don't you think that is going to affect the climate on this planet? And they know that. There's a guy called Michael Mann that invented the ice hockey chart that they're using, the ICPP, or the IPCC, should I say. And they have all fell in line with the data. What I mean by that is they've all chosen to use data from the 1800s, and they've omitted all the other data before that. The reason why they've done it is because they're relying on the public not being smart enough and not being motivated enough to go and check thousands and thousands of climate data on the internet freely for themselves. And that is why, we brought here at the observatory, our CO2 detector, so that we could do atmospheric monitoring of CO2 ourselves. That's why we've got the oxygen sensor. That's why we've got the Trimag, equipment to monitor the magnetic North Pole migration. And that's why we have in, a few countries now, magnetometers, and there will be some magnetometer data added to the website from Arizona in America tomorrow. But, this is more important. I just want to say at this point, before we go and have a look at some charts, a big thank you to those few people that realise what's going on over the last couple of weeks is wrong. What's taking place right now at Cop26 in Glasgow, the climate debate with all the world's leaders, is absolutely wrong. They need to extend the range of climate data that they're looking at in order to get a better picture and gauge what's going on. They also need to understand that they can't reduce by any significant amount the carbon already in the atmosphere. And by raising £100 trillion is not going to prevent anything. There is a lot of aspects. This topic is so big and we need to talk about all these aspects, but there are good explanations as to why things are happening around the world. There are in the Indian Ocean, in the Pacific, small islands that seem to be having higher water lines, sea level rising. It appears that the sea level is rising, but what people don't realise is, only us don't realise this, that the migratory pattern of animals is a natural process of avoiding climates that no longer sustain people. We've seen it in our ancestors' history, where the Mayans, it appears that they just evacuated, their settlements. It's because, as we see in Egypt, cities underwater, and they're there today. If you go diving there, you can see a lot of these cities are underwater. Is that things change on our planet, and that is natural. There is no need to raise 100 trillion to prevent global warming happening, because you won't be able to do it. It's impossible. The biosphere that we live on manages itself and has done for millions and millions of years. And all they need to do is be a little bit more patient, because the temperature will change, it will decline, and when that happens, naturally the carbon will begin to drop. Simple as that. I want to show you the charts that they're using, because they're all following the same suit. They've all got the data from the 1800s, and all I can ask you guys is, do you think that is the right way to go about science? By just basing the last 200 years on your predictions what will happen in the future. They've not even covered one glacial period or interglacial period, and they've not asked themselves, well, how we rise out of the last glacial period 15,000 years ago? How did that happen? The one before that, over 100,000 years ago, humans was not even here. Yet the temperatures rose and we came out of a glacial period. We've got the data, we've got the science. It's just that it's being used to support raising trillions and trillions of dollars. And that will have a massive detrimental impact on us all. It is a very, very sad day when somebody is taking so much of their personal time, me, to try and get the word out there, to try and prevent a disaster happening, because that is exactly what's going to happen. They're telling people it's global warming. You know what? You need to be preparing for a cooling period, because that is what happens next on our earth in this present time. And they talk about the ice caps melting, but they won't talk about what's happened in 2021. 2 million square kilometres of ice being added to the Arctic Circle. They won't mention that, will they? It's a sad time when they fail to listen to scientists. This is what we're having to put up with. Have a look at the data that they've chosen to base their argument on. Have a look at this, guys. Here is a better record. It's 400,000 years of climate, and you can see that the temperature has risen many times and it has dropped. You can see that CO2 does drop when the temperature drops. Now, why would you think that would not happen this time, where we are at 0 on this chart? All I want to say is that we've spent more years going up and down than we have what normally happens over the past 4 cycles of interglacial periods, and as a result of that, more carbon has gone into the atmosphere. But we shouldn't be alarmed by it, because the levels of CO2 in the atmosphere right now are perfect for biodiversity on our planet to thrive, and it doesn't affect us at those levels. I've said this before, and I will show you guys one of the days in a video. I will put the CO2 detector that we've got in the living room, and you will see it go up to 1,000 parts per million. Now, are you telling me when we go out our front doors that that is toxic for us? That's crazy. We've just looked at 400,000 years of climate history. Now we're looking at just 15,000 years. It wouldn't be even bad if they chose 15,000 years to have a look at instead of 200 years. I mean, you get a lot better idea what's going on over even 15,000 years. You don't need to go back 400,000 years. All the information is there for you in 15,000 years. We've got the Eleusinian warm period, the Roman warm period, the medieval warm period. We've got the 8,200 year calling, and then we're at the present temperature line. You can see that they're calling it present global warming. It's at the same level as what they was calling the 8,200 year calling level. Is it calling? Is it warming? And you know, it's no wonder people get confused with all this. But there we were 12,000 years ago, coming out of the warming at the end of the Younger Dryas period. That was our last glacial period. And the Industrial Revolution wasn't started then, was it? But what was it that drove the temperatures up to an interglacial period, what we've been in now for that period of time onwards? It wasn't the Industrial Revolution, was it? The Industrial Revolution was 200 years ago, and that's why they've targeted their charts, which I'm about to show you now, on that period, because that's the only way you can cherry pick the data that makes it look like global warming's taking place. But I will just bring your attention to the present temperature line on this chart, and bring your attention to the 8,200 year calling, and then tell you where we are, which is more like the truth. They're calling it the present global warming. It's at the same level as what the 8,200 year calling was. And here is why it's so dangerous what they're doing. It's because we are about to, as this chart shows, go back into a glacial period. We're about to cross the threshold where we go back into a glacial period. That's, guys, what we need to be preparing for. Cities are not going to survive this. You need to be by a coastal region, and the only reason I say that is because there is more abundant food in a glacial period of time alongside the oceans. And that is why Eskimos, most of their staple diet is from what they catch out the oceans. Now, if you want to stay in the northern hemisphere above 40 degrees latitude, then try and be as close to the oceans as you can, because you might have to fall back on that as your only food source, because plants, tomatoes, carrots do not grow unless you can artificially heat a greenhouse and do it efficiently. And I said that there's a guy called the Real Martian on YouTube who's been trying to do that in a container and has not been successful yet. And the reason why he's trying to do it is because he used to work for NASA, and if he can come up with a system where one container can feed a family, then that's a perfect system to take to Mars, isn't it? So, moving on. I'm going to go through these pretty quick, but it's just to give you an idea that what I'm talking about is right. That, you know, they're only going back only a couple of hundred years, and the reason why they're doing that is because that's when the Industrial Revolution started, and of course they've cherry-picked the data from there on, because it does show climate inclining. When we just seen on the previous chart, it's about to go into a glacial period, but you can see where this is coming from. And someone said you should reference your charts that you're showing. Well, you can see IPCC scenarios are responsible for producing this chart that you're looking at, and it has been cherry-picked, the data. It's not good science, it's bad science, it's nothing short of criminal behaviour when you do this, and then at the same time try and ask for 100 trillion. There's more. It isn't just the IPCC, as you're going to find out. Again, this is another chart from the IPCC. I've got to give them a little bit more credit because they do go back 1,000 years, but they focus on the period of time from the 1800s more than anything else in here. And we will also take some of that credit away from them because this chart goes up to 2100. So this is another not 80 years or 79 years of predictive estimates. It's not true what they're showing, because what's going to happen at 2021 is we're going to start to see it decline, the temperature. And let's face it, look where it is right now compared to where it starts. And they was very clever in not going back any further, because they would have covered, like we've seen on the other charts. If they'd have gone back a few more thousand years, they would have gone to the cool period, which would have been at the same period of where we are right now. And if they'd gone back even further to 12,000 years, they would have covered the last glacial period. And of course, if you're going to put those sort of temperatures on the chart, it's going to look like, how can you then prove that from the 1800s to the current time, how man has, wrecked the atmosphere with regards to pumping so much CO2 in. But the point is, again, the cherry picking the data. Here we are again, reference from the IPCC. It's even got the guy's name down there, Peter Carter, Climate Emergency Institute he works for. He's produced this chart for him, and again, it starts at the 1860s. You see how these organisations all falling in line with the data that they want to present to the masses of people. It's nothing short of cherry picking the data. You don't base what you think might happen on just looking back at just 200 years of climate, when this planet is millions and millions of years old. If you want to omit all the glacial and interglacial periods off your data, then of course what you're showing people is nothing but cherry picked data to rebut your argument, so you can win your argument and get your 100 trillion. That's nothing short about that. Again, another chart. You can see this is from Noaa. Again, they've cherry picked the data from the 1880s just to show that current warming trend, and we know why they've done that. It's because from the Industrial Revolution to the present time, yes, it does show like there is some warming happening, but it doesn't really start till the 1940s on this chart. But they have to make sure it goes back to the the beginning of the Industrial Revolution to prove the case. But I want to drum it home to you guys: you cannot predict the future climate when you only take the past 200 years into consideration. You omit the Younger Dryas, which was the last ice age, and all the other ice ages and interglacial periods before that, and it shows you time and time again that temperatures rise when they do, CO2 rises. When temperature drops, CO2 drops. And the reason why we have so much CO2 in the atmosphere right now is just because we've spent so much time the last 12,000 years bobbing up and down on that line that makes us go into a glacial or interglacial period. So naturally there will be more carbon in the atmosphere, but the levels of carbon in the atmosphere right now are not a thing to worry about. And lastly, but not leastly, we have a chart from NASA showing the same time period. Shame on you, NASA. Is it no wonder you get so much criticism today when you should know better? It is really sad to see all these organisations stacking up the data all in the same manner and, omitting anyone else that says, hold the fire, one moment. What you've done is just considered 200 years of climate history and made your predictions based on that. If this was real life or death situation and these global leaders was put on the spot, and it wasn't for being money motivated to raise 100 trillion, which is what they're trying to do this week at Cop26 in Glasgow, then they would be really trying to protect people's lives, because we are going back into a glacial period. This global warming nonsense only came about because all these organisations have come to the conclusion that they can raise a lot of money and it won't get spent on anything, because you can't take the carbon out of the atmosphere once it's in there unless the planet naturally cools. And we see what happens when it does naturally cool. The CO2 levels drop. We just have to be patient. We don't have to spend £100 trillion on anything. We just lift. But all we need to do is leave nature to do her job, and then at the same time realise where we are actually going with our climate, and that is into a glacial period. And we need to make sure that these cities can sustain, people living in them that live above certain latitudes on this planet, because this is going to affect millions, in fact billions of people. There's a lot of people that live over 40-degree latitude on this planet, and those are the people it's going to affect. Now, getting back to the beginning of this video, we're trying to help people. I'm very passionate about science. In fact, the only other thing that I'm just probably close to being as passionate as science is probably cooking. And I don't know how long I'm going to last on YouTube. Obviously they don't mind infringing on my basic human rights. They have silenced me, and now they've victimised me with taking, revenue that we much need at this observatory to keep it going. And, at the end of the day, like I say, they have shot the surgeon performing heart surgery. I am not an enemy of any one of these organisations like Google or YouTube. I'm not. When I earn advert revenue, YouTube earns advert revenue, but they have shot themselves in the face in order to silence me, and it's quite clear, on two subjects which I am qualified to talk about. It's really, really a sad time that we're living in, and I am really concerned. I'm actually a little bit frightened, because what is going to be the next level they're going to resort to when they can't keep people quiet? Killing them? Well, if that's the case, then we've learnt nothing over the last 90 years, because this is exactly what happened just before the Nazis started to commit some massive atrocities, and millions were murdered as a result of that. And this behaviour is no different to that. They burnt books. You are burning people's accounts on YouTube and other platforms like it. You should be completely ashamed of what you've done. With what you've done with me alone, Google, you should be absolutely shamed. If you work for Google, what you've just done is shot the firefighter trying to save people's lives. Guys, we need the funding to keep going. It's as simple as that. If we can't keep funding coming in for this observatory, we can't keep doing what we're doing. It's simple. I may as well turn to the other platforms and do my cooking videos or something like that. Set up another account. I know I'd be more successful, and I wouldn't be regulated like I am here. If we do lose this platform, there's the website, and there'll be some instructions put up on the website, poleshiftnews.com, as to where to go next. To our next platform. And you can always become a patron as well. Guys, there's a link down there, PayPal link, if you want to help support us. It would be really appreciated. I hope you appreciate what we're trying to do for people. We just want to keep you informed. We don't want you running in the wrong direction when that, catastrophe happens. We want you to be prepared for that. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help as many people as we can. Simple as that. Guys, have an amazing day. And as always, bye for now.